It was just one last time a goodbye gift. I think I didn't do anything wrong. Just shared a little story with friends about how my ex begged for one last night. I laughed, said it didn't mean anything, only to see my fiancé's face turn white. That same evening, instead of wedding plans, I was handed legal papers that ended it all. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Planning the wedding should have made me feel settled, but instead it made me restless. Daniel sat across from me at the dining table, calculator in hand, scribbling numbers about flower costs and catering deposits. He asked if we really needed the extra string quartet. I told him he was sucking the joy out of the whole thing. He said we had to be careful with money. I laughed, saying if he wanted careful, he should have stayed single. He frowned, but he didn't argue, and that was the problem. He never argued. My mother called that evening and asked how plans were going. I told her Daniel was being his usual stiff self, turning love into a spreadsheet. She sighed, saying I needed someone who would let me shine, not pull me down with talk of limits. Her words sank into me. I started to believe maybe Daniel was lucky to even have me. Later, as he worked late, I opened my phone and scrolled through messages. Adrian's name blinked on the screen. My old flame. We had reconnected a few weeks earlier, harmless at first. He said he wondered how I was if I ever thought of him. I told him I was engaged, but he said he just wanted to talk. That tiny thrill of someone from my past wanting me again felt better than any of Daniel's budget charts. When I slipped the phone face down on the table, Daniel asked if everything was fine. I told him it was just work. Too many emails. He nodded, trusting as always. Inside, I smirked. He didn't realize I could keep both worlds spinning. As I zipped my wedding planner shut, I thought nothing wrong with one little secret before forever. At work the next week, the buzz of wedding talk followed me everywhere. My coworkers asked about the dress, the venue, the cake. I gave short answers, pretending to be overwhelmed. In truth, my thoughts were on Adrian. He had texted again, saying he still remembered things only he and I shared. I told him to stop, but then I laughed at his persistence. It felt flattering. By lunchtime, I was already planning to meet friends that evening at the wine bar, where I could play the confident bride-to-be who had men chasing her. That night, glass in hand, I leaned back in my chair as the girls begged for stories. I smirked and said Adrian still wanted me. I even bragged that he had begged for one last night together, and that I'd given it to him as a goodbye gift before marriage. They gasped, then laughed, and I soaked in the attention. I said it didn't mean anything, just closure. The more they giggled, the bigger my smile grew. What I didn't realize was that Daniel had walked in quietly, planning to surprise me. He froze at the bar, catching just enough of my words. When I noticed him, I brushed it off, telling the girls my fiancé was too jealous for his own good. They laughed again, and I acted like his shocked face was proof. Later at home, he asked me directly what I had meant. I told him he misunderstood, that it was just a joke. I accused him of being paranoid and told him if he trusted me, he wouldn't ask. He sat silent, and I turned that silence into victory. What I didn't know was that while I laughed with friends, he had already logged into our shared tablet and found the messages I thought I had deleted. The weekend brought to dinner with both our families at a little restaurant Daniel's parents loved. I dressed carefully, determined to look untouchable, to show everyone that I was in control. As we sat around the table, conversation turned to the wedding. His mother asked if I was nervous, and I smiled wide, saying not at all. Then, for the sake of a laugh, I joked that men never really let go, that some still call years later, asking for one last chance. My friends from the wine bar would have laughed, but here forks froze in midair. Richard, Daniel's father, stared at me like I had just spat on the tablecloth. He asked if I thought it was appropriate to say something like that with my fiancée beside me. I waved my hand, saying it was harmless honesty, that I wasn't afraid to admit I had been wanted. Daniel's face didn't change, but the muscles in his jaw tightened. My mother came to my defense immediately, saying I was just bold, that Daniel needed to loosen up. That only deepened the silence. Claire, my sister, shook her head and muttered that I was humiliating myself. I snapped back that she was jealous, that she couldn't handle attention like I could. She stood up from the table and left, refusing to look at me. I pretended not to care. That night my phone lit up with a message from Adrian. He wrote that it meant a lot to him that I'd spoken so fondly about our secret. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told him about the dinner, so how did he know? Then I realized Daniel must have seen the notification when we shared screens. He didn't yell or confront me. He just sat across the room scrolling silently on his laptop as if he was gathering every detail I thought I had hidden. At Daniel's parents' house for a pre-wedding dinner, I tried to spin everything as honesty. I said at least I was brave enough to admit my past instead of pretending to be perfect. His parents looked at me with tight smiles, while mine insisted Daniel was too stiff to handle a woman like me. I smirked, acting like their doubt proved my point. When Daniel's mother asked directly if I was serious about marriage, I laughed and said, "Everyone has unfinished chapters, but that didn't mean I wasn't committed." Daniel stayed silent, his calmness sharper than anger. Paul, his brother, finally spoke. He said everyone was tired of my games, that Daniel deserved respect I refused to give. I rolled my eyes, accusing him of meddling. But just as I thought I had the room under control, a friend texted me. Screenshots of my bragging at the wine bar were being shared around. My face flushed hot, and when I glanced at Daniel, his steady gaze told me he already knew. Daniel chose that night to act. At home, he asked me to sit at the kitchen table. I expected another lecture, but instead he opened a folder. Inside were printed screenshots of my chats with Adrian, copies of group messages where I had bragged, even the photos from the wine bar. My throat went dry. I rushed into excuses. I said it was nothing but jokes, that people twisted words. I even tried tears, telling him he was ruining everything over harmless fun. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed another document on the table, an official cancellation notice for the wedding, signed and stamped. My mother shouted at him on the phone later, saying he was cold and ungrateful. But his father told him he had done the right thing. Claire wouldn't even speak to me. Daniel said calmly this wasn't revenge, only dignity. Then he left me at the table, staring at papers that turned my perfect wedding into nothing but a memory. We met at a small cafe, the kind of place where no one would interrupt. I dressed carefully, hoping to remind him of why he chose me. I told him Adrian meant nothing, that I was just joking, that stress had made me say foolish things. He didn't argue. He slid a slim envelope across the table and told me it was finalized. Inside were legal filings for canceled contracts and financial claims to recover the wedding costs. I tried pleading, saying love should forgive mistakes. He shook his head and said trust was gone, and without trust there was no marriage around us. Cups clinked, and I felt suddenly exposed, powerless. When I told my mother late she had no defense left. My father quietly said I had brought it on myself and Daniel. He walked out of that cafe with his head high, leaving me with nothing but a folder and the echo of my own bragging that had cost me everything.